Next up, taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Ford Ranger. So first thing I'm going to point out, I am obviously ridiculously low on fuel because this vehicle just landed at the dealership, so they still haven't had a chance to really PDI or set this thing up yet, but you want to make sure you're filling up your fuel. Now, if you get any messages inside of the cluster screen, you can also just push the OK button in order to get rid of them. But I gotta say, the steering wheel inside of the 2024 Ranger is solid. It feels great. It feels way more premium in comparison to last year's model. The steering wheel still is manual telescoping. So just by your left knee, there's a release there. You can go in, out, up and down to find that perfect position. Once you find it, click it in order to lock it back into place. The steering wheel also has the option for heated. And if that's available, you can also push down there to toggle it on or off. But one great thing is that you can also use the voice command prompt to be able to turn your heated steering wheel on that way instead. It's amazing. But if you want to walk through on the new infotainment system, you'll find it down in the description of this video. But let's dive in. So you've got a series of different buttons along the outside here. So you've got your volume rocker along the side there, voice command prompt where you can do things like I said, like you can change songs, radio stations, you can navigate using your voice, you can adjust your climate control settings. There are so many things you can do with this system. Then you've got all of these different buttons that are available specifically for the adaptive cruise control system. So you can toggle the adaptive cruise on or off. There's a distance indicator, so how close or far are you away from the vehicle that's in front of you. Think of it like a 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi type of a rule as you go. Then once you get up to speed, you can then press up or down to either increase or decrease 1 kilometer or 1 mile per hour at a time. You can push there to cancel, or you can brake in order to be able to cancel it as well. Then there's a lane keeping system that you can turn on or off. So there's a lane keeping system, and then there's also a lane centering system that you can enable through the screen here as well. The big difference between the lane centering system and the lane keeping. Lane centering is going to keep you perfectly balanced in your lane. Not fully hands-free driving, but pretty close at the same time. Versus lane keeping will do one of 3 things depending on how you have it set up through the system. Actually, it's driver assistance. So it's either going to give you a little bit of a steering wheel shake, it's going to nudge you back into your lane, or it's going to do a mixture of both. But I mean, yeah, so many things. So you've got your lane centering, you can toggle off there if you want to. And then there's a lane keeping system that you can adjust for 3 different modes there as well. But it is, I said, a really nice system at the same time. So if you want a full walkthrough, like if you want to actually see what it's like using the adaptive cruise control system in person, like live, find that walkthrough down in the description of this video if it's available. And then you've got a series of other buttons along the side here. So this one is going to be able to answer or hang up on a phone call. You can use this to change between songs and stations. So actually we're on perfect FM right there. So you can push this if you wanted to jump between all of your active presets. But one cool thing is that you can also do a longer press and hold if you wanted to be able to seek that way instead. So you could seek that way. It's probably not the best way to go. Honestly, the way that I would recommend changing stations is actually going to be using the voice command prompt. 97.7 FM.
Tuning to FM 97.7.
Look at that. Beautiful. Nice and simple. So yeah, that's definitely the way that I would recommend doing that instead. But you can adjust this all sorts of different ways. Stick on the left-hand side. You can flash out your high beams if you want to. You've got your turn signals there. Now, if you wanted to permanently lock your high beams out though, so you can see there I'm flashing and it's not locking out. And that's because just by my left knee, will you be able to see? Regardless, you've got a little selector switch there. I'll do some B-roll. So you've got a selector switch there, and I'm in the auto mode. So you want to be out of the auto mode. So if you're in the headlamp mode, you can then push away in order to permanently lock your high beams out instead. But when you're in the auto mode, there's also auto high beams. So if the vehicle recognizes you need the beams, it'll turn them on automatically. If somebody's oncoming, it's automatically going to dim them before bringing them back on again. It's a great setting. Like I said, you could permanently lock them out or just flash instead. From there, you've also got control for your windshield wipers. You're going to pull in towards you for that wiper fluid to go. And then when you're in the auto mode, it's how fast or slow do you want to be? But straightforward there. That's, like I said, the steering wheel inside of this thing, premium, especially compared to last year. But there are so many things about this cluster screen. So first thing I'm going to point out, Along the very bottom, you can see what gear you're in. So whether you're park, reverse, neutral, drive. Then once you're in drive, you can also go for the dedicated manual mode if you wanted to be able to adjust gears out yourself that way. Manual mode works the same as paddle shifters would work. So if you want to walk through on how that actually works, the manual mode, you'll find it down in the description of this video. You've got what's currently going on with the outside temperature. Fuel, dangerously low with how many kilometers to empty. If the lane centering system was turned on, your current speed. So I've got the adaptive cruise control system turned on there, turn on, turn off, whatever the case may be. And then you can see your speed, whether or not the lane keeping system is turned on or off. So lane keeping system's off, which gives you a little bit of a different view. So the screen is kind of customized there depending on what's currently enabled. What direction you're currently facing, your current odometer, if the auto start stop system is engaged, whether or not the lane keeping system's on, and then if your seatbelt's plugged in there as well. But one thing to point out, there actually are two different cluster screens that are available. So it's either going to be this larger screen instead, or there's a smaller 8-inch. But honestly, they've got pretty much the exact same functionality between them. It's just going to depend on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in. Then we've got the buttons along the right side of the steering wheel there as well that are going to let us navigate through the cluster screen. So you've got your basic back button there. You can go up and down this way, and then there's a little sub-menu button as well. So I'm going to start off with this little screen, which, look at that. That just brings the screen to life. You've got your tachometer, you've got your speedometer there, you've got a fully different layout because we're not in the calming mode instead. We're now in one of the other options. So that's kind of one of the nice things. So you go to the calming screen and watch this. A few seconds in, brings you out to the screen instead. But if you want that fuller view, you'd also have that option. So if you wanted to reset your fuel economy, you're just pushing and holding OK in order to do it. Fuel economy is pretty high right now just because I'm literally sitting here explaining the features. You've got your trip counter, same idea. You can press and hold OK in order to be able to reset your trip counter, or you can configure your view. So configuring your view lets you add in a series of additional screens. So if you wanted your off-road status there, your vehicle pitch and roll, and a few other things, and then you go back home, then you swipe up, and we've all of a sudden added in these extra modes. So your pitch and roll are now there, and your off-road status, which that same idea, looks pretty cool. So you can see your pitch and roll along the top, whether or not you've got your electronic locking rear differential going, and then as you're driving, you'll actually see the drive shaft spinning, which is pretty neat. You can push this little button to get some additional views. So you can get back into your My View, which this is your My View. You can go back home in order to see your trip information. So you can see there, you can get to all of this info a few different ways, but you can see fuel economy, auto start stop status, seat belts, and things like that. Versus an off-road mode. So you can see your off-road status, your vehicle pitch and roll, and then your driver assistant settings there as well. If you had a trailer hooked up, you'd have your trailer information with driver assistant options for your trailer, for your towing options. Navigation settings are available there, so you can look at your home addresses, previous destinations, favorites, things that are nearby. So if you wanted to look at, let's say, a restaurant. Let's go to, Papa John's. There we go.
Please drive to highlighted route.
So it's calculating now. It's showing up right inside of the infotainment system. So you can see that we're going there. And as you start to drive, you're not going to get a full mapping cluster, but you will get a little display along the top there, letting you know what directions you should be taking. From there, you can also cancel the route. You can go into your phone. So if a phone is connected, you'd be able to make phone calls and look at previous calls and things like that. Audio, you can switch between your available sources, so AM, FM, Sirius XM, if your phone was connected, things like that. Some additional settings, so you can configure the gauges a little bit, so you can show your selectable gauges there. So all of a sudden, we've got a few extra gauges, and what do you want showing in the middle there? Do you want your turbo boost, oil pressure, whatever the case may be for the left versus right, or you can simplify it a little bit instead. Do you want to show, there we go, turn-by-turn indication as you're going through your navigation. So that's going to show up in the cluster screen along the very top. And then there's a little secondary speedometer. So if you're in Canada versus the US, you can show kilometers or miles if you'd like to. Kind of useful. From there, there's also basics for vehicle maintenance. So you can see what your tire pressure is, going back to your engine information, and then your oil life. So if you're changing oil yourself, you can just do a press and hold of the OK button there in order to reset it back to 0 again. But that's the basics there. There's one other thing, and that's as you navigate through the different drive modes. So there's normal mode versus eco mode, and every one of these modes will do something different. So not only does it change up the dynamic look of the screen, but like sport mode, it's going to play with your different shift points. So it's going to hold onto your RPMs a little bit longer to give you a sportier performance. when you're in, what was the fun mode? There we go. Sand mode. So mud ruts and sand will do the same, but shifts you automatically into 4 high, locks out the rear differential, and it gives you this neat screen instead. So you can look at your vehicle pitch and roll versus your driver assistance versus your off-road status. So very, very useful if you're going off-road. And when you're in that off-road mode, look at that. It also puts you into the off-road mode in your screen. So, I mean, I love that. So useful. So if you are using your Ranger specifically for off-road purposes, you've got the FX4 package, the Raptor, whatever the case may be, you will have some of these additional settings. But I love how all of the different modes change up the dynamic look of the screen as well. Really useful. And then, yeah, like I said, if you prefer just to have a basic calming screen instead, you go to your My View and then just to the calming screen along the bottom. And that just gets rid of all of like the extra stuff and just gives you the basics of what you need to know. So I know that's a lot of information there, but that's everything you need to know about the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Ford Ranger.